On April 6, 1933, the definition of crime changed without warning. The metal in your pocket. Yesterday, it was money. That same metal, today, it could send you to prison. No vote, no debate, no negotiation. A machinist in Cleveland opens his pay envelope. $20 gold pieces, same as always. He stops at a diner on Euclid Avenue, orders eggs, coffee, pays in gold. The waitress hesitates, not because the coin is fake, but because it is now illegal. By midnight, under Executive Order 6102, every American was required to surrender their gold to the Federal Reserve. Refuse, and you faced a $10,000 fine. That's over $200,000 in today's terms, or 10 years in prison. This wasn't theft in the way people imagine theft. No masked men, no broken safe. This was something quieter. The rules changed, and suddenly compliance became mandatory patriotism. The official reason was stability. The real outcome was control. Because what disappeared that week wasn't just gold. It was the last form of money Americans could hold without permission. And once it was gone, something else became possible. A price could be changed, not by the market, not by supply, but by decree. And when that price changed, everything denominated in dollars changed with it. But that part came later. First, they had to convince an entire nation to hand it over willingly. The confiscation didn't begin in 1933. It began years earlier, with a promise, a simple one. Your dollar is as good as gold. In the early 20th century, Americans didn't trust paper. They trusted weight. A $20 bill was not money. It was a claim check, a receipt for something real sitting in a vault. Gold coins circulated because people demanded them. Paper circulated because it could be redeemed for them. That distinction mattered, because it meant the government didn't fully control money. Not yet. Then came 1929. Banks failed in waves. Quiet at first, then suddenly. A farmer deposits his savings in October. By February, the bank doors are locked. A handwritten sign, closed until further notice. Inside, his dollars still exist, on paper. Outside, they are gone. People adapted quickly. They stopped trusting banks. They withdrew gold instead. Not paper, metal, something you could hold, hide, trade without permission. This is the part most people misunderstand. The crisis wasn't just deflation. It was a loss of confidence in the system itself. Gold started disappearing from circulation, not because it vanished, but because people removed it, hoarded it, buried it in backyards, stored it in lockboxes, passed it quietly between families. From the government's perspective, this was a problem, because under the gold standard, every dollar issued was supposed to be backed by gold reserves. If citizens held the gold, the system lost its foundation. Imagine a casino where customers start cashing out all their chips at once. The tables don't matter anymore. The building doesn't matter. Only the vault matters. And if the vault empties, the game ends. So the narrative changed. Hoarding wasn't caution anymore. It became sabotage. Newspapers began using new language. Unpatriotic. Harming recovery. Selfish. Radio broadcasts urged cooperation. Politicians framed surrender as civic duty. Surrender gold. Save America. And slowly, the idea took hold that keeping your own savings, in the form you trusted most, was somehow damaging the country. This was the psychological pivot, not force, reframing. Because once people accept that holding real money is a threat, they will exchange it voluntarily, or at least with minimal resistance. And when enough people comply, the next step doesn't look like confiscation anymore. It looks like policy. The order itself was only one page, but the machinery behind it was precise. Under Executive Order 6102, Americans were required to deliver their gold coins, bullion, and certificates to a bank or Federal Reserve branch by May 1, 1933. In exchange, they received paper dollars, fixed rate, $20.67 per ounce. No negotiation, no market pricing, no appeal. This is where the mechanism begins, because this was not a seizure without compensation. It was a forced conversion, and that distinction made it legal. If the government had simply taken gold, it would have triggered immediate resistance. constitutional challenges, possibly violence. But by offering dollars in exchange, even at a fixed rate, it transformed confiscation into compliance. You weren't being robbed. You were being paid. Now imagine you are a shop owner in Chicago. You spent 20 years saving in gold coins. Not because you're wealthy, but because you watched banks fail in 1907 and again in 1921. You don't trust paper promises. A notice arrives. You must surrender your gold within 25 days. You hesitate, but your bank already knows your deposits. Your safety deposit box is not private in the way you believed. Banks were instructed to report suspicious withdrawals. The system was mapping compliance in real time. So you comply. You hand over your coins. You receive paper. At that moment, you still believe you've preserved your wealth. Same nominal value, same purchasing power for now. But something critical has changed. Before, your wealth was outside the system. Now it is entirely inside it. Trackable, controllable, redefinable. This is the first layer of the mechanism. Remove the asset from private hands. Replace it with a claim. Then comes the second layer. A question most people never asked at the time. Why $20? 67 there. That price wasn't discovered by the market. It was defined by law under the Gold Standard Act of 1900. For decades, gold had been fixed at that price. But in 1933, the market reality was different. Gold was scarce. Demand was rising. Confidence in paper was collapsing. If gold had been freely traded, its price would have soared, but it wasn't allowed to. The price was frozen, long enough for the government to collect it. This is where the trap closes. Because once the gold is centralized, the price no longer needs to stay fixed. And this is the part that feels abstract. Until you translate it, imagine you are forced to sell your house to the state for $200,000. Weeks later, the state reclassifies the neighborhood and sells identical houses for $350,000. You were paid, but you were still stripped of value. That difference, the gap between forced price and real price, is the hidden tax. In 1933, Americans didn't see it immediately because the second move hadn't happened yet. But inside the Treasury, the plan was already in motion. Gold wasn't just being collected, it was being prepared for repricing. And once that happened, the dollar itself would change, not in appearance, not in design, but in what it could actually buy. Because money is not defined by what it says. It is defined by what it can be exchanged for. And that definition was about to be rewritten. It happened quietly. No announcement framed it as a profit. No headline called it a transfer of wealth. But in January 1934, under the Gold Reserve Act, the government changed one number. Gold was no longer $20.67 per ounce. It was now $35, a 69% increase. Overnight, nothing about the gold itself had changed. Same metal, same weight, same scarcity. Only the price, defined by the state, was different. Now go back to the machinist, the shop owner, the family that surrendered coins weeks earlier. They were paid at $20.67. But the government now held that same gold, valued at $35. That difference didn't disappear. It accumulated inside the Treasury. This is the moment the mechanism completes. Confiscation, conversion, repricing. Short sentences now, because this is where it becomes clear. They took the asset. They paid below market reality. They changed the reference price. They kept the difference. No new gold was mined. No productivity increased. No innovation occurred. Wealth didn't grow. It moved from private hands to the state. And this is where the official story fractures. The public was told this was necessary to fight deflation, to stabilize the economy, to restore confidence. But confidence in what? The dollar had just been devalued. Each paper dollar now represented less gold than before, which means every saver holding dollars, not gold, experienced a silent loss, not through a visible deduction, but through dilution. Imagine waking up and discovering your savings still say $10,000, but what that $10,000 can buy has been permanently reduced. No transaction, no receipt, no notification, just a new reality. And here is the detail most people miss. Foreign governments were still allowed to exchange dollars for gold at the new price. Domestic citizens were not. So the system created two classes of participants, those who could access real money and those who were confined to paper. That separation would hold for decades, until 1971, when the final link between the dollar and gold was cut entirely. On paper, nothing was stolen. That's the official version. You gave gold. You received dollars. Transaction complete. But paper records are not reality. Usability is reality. Go back to that shop owner in Chicago. Before 1933, he holds gold coins. He can trade them privately. He can store them outside the banking system. He can cross a state line with them. No approval needed. After 1933, he holds paper dollars. Those dollars sit in a bank. The bank can close. Withdrawals can be limited. Transfers can be tracked. And the value of those dollars, as already proven, can be changed by policy. So what did he actually lose? Not just purchasing power. He lost optionality, the ability to act without permission. And that loss doesn't show up on a balance sheet. Now look at who didn't lose. Large institutions complied immediately. Banks consolidated gold flows efficiently. The Federal Reserve expanded control over reserves. And the government? It captured the spread between $20.67 and $35. That difference didn't sit idle. It was used to expand the monetary base. More dollars could now be issued, backed by gold that had been forcibly centralized. This is the inversion. The public surrendered hard money to save the system. The system used that money to expand itself. Now introduce a second timeline. August 15, 1971. Richard Nixon appears on television. He uses one word, temporary. The United States will suspend the convertibility of dollars into gold. Foreign governments, the last participants with access, are cut off. No more redemption. No more anchor. The dollar becomes pure fiat. No vote. Again, no expiration date. And that temporary decision, it is still in place today. 50-plus years later. This is the final step of the same pattern. First, remove gold from citizens. Then, remove gold from the system. At each stage, the justification is stability. At each stage, the result is more control and fewer exits. Because once money becomes entirely policy-based, your wealth no longer depends on what you own. It depends on what you're allowed to use. History does not repeat in headlines. It repeats in mechanisms. 1933 was not about gold. It was about control over what counts as money. 1971 was not about convertibility. It was about removing the final external constraint. And today, the pattern is no longer hidden. It's just faster. Bank bail-ins redefine deposits as liabilities. Accounts can be frozen without physical presence. Transactions can be blocked, reversed, or flagged in real time. No confiscation trucks required. Just a policy update. Now, step back. Every stage followed the same sequence. 1. Redefine the asset. 2. Restrict access. 3. Force conversion. 4. Repress or dilute. The people who suffered most were not the reckless. They were the compliant, the ones who believed the system would not change the rules mid-game. So what survives? Not speculation, not prediction. Structure. Assets that do not rely entirely on a single point of permission. Assets that remain usable if intermediaries fail, freeze, or comply with new directives. But there is no perfect shield. Every form of wealth carries risk. Storage, liquidity, legality, visibility. So the question is not, what is safe? The question is, what remains usable under stress? Because that is the only definition that matters when systems break. In 1933, the choice was invisible until it was too late. Today, it is not. You can remain fully inside the system, efficient, convenient, exposed. Or you can deliberately hold part of your life outside of it. Less convenient, but resilient. History does not force the decision. It only records the consequences of those who delayed it.